Now we're going to focus on Switzerland with the future of Switzerland as a leader in the cannabis industry. So please help me welcome our moderator for this hour, Farida Hussain, Managing Director, Dovetail Consulting. Please give her a warm round of applause, Farida.
Thank you.
Luc Richner, CEO of Cannavigia. Another round of applause.
Thank you.
Leonid Kotlyar, President of DéWarrior Unlimited.
No arms.
Michela Mastropietro, Co-founder and Managing Director of SwissQueen. Stefan Strasser, CTO of SwissExtract. Last but not least, Petronanos, founder of Fineleaf. Right, Farida?
Quite the fan section.
Thank you. Cool. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Just a little disclosure, the way I intend to lead this panel is having it more of a roundtable discussion. So we're going to try to keep a very fluid conversation going here. To start with, I just wanted to have all of the panelists explain a little bit about their area of expertise and what area can be a hub for the future of Switzerland if it's already existing, and what is compelling for external markets.
Is that me now? Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Farida. And I come from the compliance software space. Standardization is a big part of what we're doing. Why is Switzerland the hub in this, and why can it be and will it be? Switzerland always had a position in international relationships that was neutral, from a point where it allowed us to actually create or help standards to be created, and we have these organizations like the UN, the Red Cross, and all kinds of other big international organizations that run out of Switzerland because of the legal framework, because of the general because of the legal framework that we have here, and that allowed us to really build those international relationships. And one of the things that I think, especially for cannabis, will help Switzerland to keep this point and to bring that point forward is that we have that pioneer aspect in many different industries. And sorry, I'm gonna go ahead.
Luc, it's my honor to follow your speech. My name is Leo. I manage a consulting company focused on regulated and compliant cannabis verticals. So we deal with clients from around the world, from North America to Southeast Asia and Europe. And what Switzerland is incredibly uniquely positioned for is being fully self-sufficient in everything that it has to be successful in medical cannabis and eventually recreational cannabis. You have funding sources which are intrinsically within the country, requiring no foreign investment. You have a deep knowledge of cultivation and organic practices at the leading edge of Europe and the world, able to be implemented. You have technology companies that have serviced the CBD industry, and before that, the cannabis industry that briefly existed here, already present. So everything you need to succeed is already within the country, which is extremely rare for almost every jurisdiction around the world that is currently cultivating or thinking about cultivating or processing or exporting or importing or doing anything in the cannabis vertical. And I think it's a unique opportunity to understand that potential, scale it for the existing market in Switzerland, which has been the testing case for the industry for so long, and then eventually export that model as the high watermark of stability, of compliance, of quality around the world. And Michela?
Thank you, guys. My name is Michela, and I am here to represent SwissQueen. Maybe as the name already says, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Swissness and why we all are benefiting from Switzerland as a hub or as a leader in the cannabis industry. So a little bit has been said already. I think in Switzerland we have a great environment when it comes to different things an institution, investors, or a new industry is looking into. Going to be focusing a little bit on the whole trust maybe we have from a consumer side, but not only. I mean, also if we talk about political standards, financial stability, Swissness, and what Swissness means all over the world. I think this is where we can benefit, and we are profiting from that. On the other hand, of course, pricing and the cost in Switzerland might be a red flag to some as well, but I'm sure that these kind of privileges we have don't come for free, so that's why we are here talking a little bit about what the privileges are and how we can use that to benefit our industry, to maybe learn from others' mistakes and do better in future.
Thank you, Michela. My name is Stefan. I'm the CTO of SwissExtract. SwissExtract is probably one of the first Swiss companies get the Bio-Swiss standard, which is one of the biggest organic standards worldwide. We are producing CBD in the future for the pilot project THC. Why Switzerland is one of the leaders in the cannabis industry? Swiss agriculture in the back, if we look back in the 90s, we get so many knowledge here in Switzerland. We produced seeds for the Dutch market. We delivered hundreds of kilos, thousands of kilos in the 90s to the European market. It was more or less legal. Then the prohibition started again. We went to the underground, indoor facilities. Now it's time to go back to bring the plant where the plant should grow, outdoor, in greenhouses. It's an excellent plant, crop rotation plant for Swiss farmers. There are so many benefits at the cannabis plant to growing outdoor. It's amazing. There is a lot of knowledge in Switzerland, and I think this is a big opportunity for us as a Swiss producer to show that we can produce organically product which is nothing behind against indoor quality. Yeah.
Thank you, Stefan. Hi, my name is Andrew Petronanos. I'm the founder and CEO of Fineleaf. As a foreigner living in Switzerland, I can talk a lot about how to do business in Switzerland, how to follow rules and regulations, but also how to comply about the whole Swissness point of view. We started about 4 years ago, really helping a lot of companies, pan-European, a little bit like Leo here on the consulting side. And we saw a lot of opportunities to actually focus more on the medical side rather than the CBD. So for me, it's very exciting to be on this panel discussion to actually really talk about the future of Switzerland. How are we a hub? What have we learned from the past? What can we do for the future? We have exciting pilot projects coming up. Medical cannabis regulation has just changed. We really have an opportunity, of course, to show how Switzerland can do it right. We've learned a lot about foreign markets. There's a lot of conversations that have happened here about how are things done in Canada, how are things being done in Germany, how are things done in the US, how things were done in Holland. And now we really have the opportunity as people here in Switzerland to, of course, allow foreign companies to come here and do business together with us, but also how are we a hub? Are we a hub for manufacturing? Are we a hub for research? Are we a hub for investment? Are we an exporting hub? We definitely have a lot of things in Switzerland, from agriculture knowledge to chocolate production to pharmaceutical integration to innovation and compliance. And yes, we are very excited to talk why will Switzerland be a hub in the global market.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So let's start with what type of company would flourish in Switzerland and what would be attracted to them? Aside from everything that you said, what is more inviting that another country doesn't offer? No?
Ladies first, okay. They always use ladies first when it's not good for them. Okay. I already said some points. we have a great politics. That's why I think we are all here right now. We have some things being done just different than in other nations. We have stability here. We have processes. We have standards. We have a lot of things that institutions might be interested in and investors will support when it comes to where are we going to do business. Then furthermore, I would add the history, and maybe Stephen is going to add something more to that as well. We have a big acceptance of cannabis, we have a big knowledge, and I think this is where we have to build on because we have an advantage when we compare it to other nations.
Yeah, you're right. As I said before, big knowledge. Yeah, we have a big knowledge here in Switzerland. We have a lot of good universities. We have big pharma companies, as you said. We have a great agriculture, organic agriculture. Not only organic, but a lot of organic agriculture with this high organic standards here in Switzerland. We have perfect zones to grow different crops. If we look into Ticino, if we look to the Valley, here in Zurich, we have excellent weather. Cannabis is growing so good outdoor, at the field. We have good harvests. So, yeah.
I mean, and again, these are all positive things. What can be intimidating for a company or a country to enter this market?
I guess high labor cost is definitely one of the things that Switzerland is a bit of a downfall or has a bit of a downfall. Other than that, I would like to tell you a lot of negative things about Switzerland, but there aren't that many because in the end of the day, we did come a very long way as a country with being a pioneer in many different industries. Switzerland has been a pioneer in the, let's go back a little bit into the history, international trade. We have a lot of the big companies that are based in Switzerland. They don't produce anything here. We created a legal framework for them to be stable, to have actual support, not just government support, financial institutions, big trading hubs. We have, through the neutrality also, we have a lot of agreements with different countries that we're not bound to actually be limited. And that's, I think, one of the big things that will drive Switzerland as a hub is that we have had these new legal frameworks now for the medical, we have the recreational part, they're all being set up and they're all here now to really drive this forward. And yes, cannabis will be one of the newer products, not new, Stevie, I know, it's been here for a very long time, but in the actual direction that it's going right now, the history and the past of that legal framework and the international agreements, that is one of the big things that I think will drive the industry and allow the industry to grow in a very strong, fast pace.
I think just to take on intimidation, right? So if companies are looking to come into Switzerland, of course we're open for business and it's exciting and you can always think my margins will be higher because Swiss people can pay more money for the product. But what a lot of companies don't realize when they are wanting to enter Switzerland to do business is, yes, Swiss clocks run at exactly every second, but actually you have to anticipate that you're coming in as a foreign company, so you have to obey with the rules, and things will take a lot longer than you thought. Just because now pilot projects opened up, I had so many foreign companies saying, great, how can we sell our brand and our cannabis now in this pilot project? Well, you have to wait. I mean, it's taken us over a year to get the first application going forward. The same on the medical side. A lot of companies are saying, okay, how can I bring my product here? Well, it's very strict regulation. We have limits on THC. All those things will take time. We have to educate doctors. We have to tell them what is available. We have to work with big pharma companies. So the intimidation part is, yes, come and do business in Switzerland, but you do have to partner with Swiss people in order to do it. You have to have a Swissness about it. And you have to also think, what is it that you want to do here? Are you coming here to disrupt the market because there isn't something existing already? I think what Stevie was saying about agriculture. Agriculture does give quite a lot towards the Swiss GDP, but actually the regulation has made it quite clear, and they have about 60% of food products or vegetable products that are produced here are for domestic use. So there will be a big protection towards the Swiss industry, which is something very important. And yes, it is intimidating for foreign companies, but come here, partner up with a Swiss consultant, or speak to Luc about compliance, or come and speak to Stevie about cultivation, or go to Michela for branding and all the rest of it we're trying to do. So, yes.
Okay,
again.
that's really good. And I like that. I think the whole thing is that what's interesting is the pilot project being launched in Switzerland. How do you think the world can learn from that? I mean, even countries like Canada, although they've kind of jumped headfirst in, there's still a chance that they can step out and create something of such a similar structure and standard, right? How does this create an opportunity?
I think the great opportunity that we have in Switzerland is that we were able to see what everybody else does. And Canada just destroyed 400 tons of flower that they couldn't sell. Sorry, I had to bring it up. In Colorado and California, you're still at 60% black market after 10 years of legalization, plus minus, don't quote me on those numbers. And well, Holland, 3 years delay on the pilot project. Then you have, well, I'm not going to go into every different country, but Malta is getting there slowly but surely. In Switzerland, what we did different, and I think what allows maybe also the size of the country, our government created a legal framework that basically entices everybody to come up with an idea how legalization could look like. It is not this is a legal framework for this, you do this or you do this. No, it's the only basis is the organic production, and all the rest is actually open for people to come together. All stakeholders from top to down, from the BAG to the cantons, to the police, to the producers, to the research institution, and everybody in between can come together and formulate how they would see legalization should look like. So it's the only actual empirical study that was conducted on how this could work. And this does not work in every country the same way. Even in Switzerland, different cantons, we have different languages, different cultures, different parts. So all of those parts have to be actually brought to that process. And that's, for me, that's what is amazing about this pilot project in Switzerland, that it's the first and only complete assessment of all stakeholders. And based on that, then you create data, and based on that data, you can make an actual a qualified decision on in which direction this should go.
Exactly. And I mean, considering you're saying that things do happen a bit slowly, it's a huge undertaking that has happened quite quickly when you look at it on that level. Does anybody else want to add to that?
I think how this more than anything, the proof is always in the pudding, right? And we've seen, and our company has advised on 3 of the Dutch pilot program licenses. And what's different is the intent. The intent to regulate trade, the intent to regulate product quality, the intent to regulate taxation systems, in the case maybe of the Dutch government, knowing how they like to operate. But what I love about the Swiss pilot is they're really taking the opportunity to gather data from different unrelated sources, right? So you have a cantonal structure and a society largely driven by referendums. So you have independent provinces, for lack of a better word, that are self-governing to some extent, referendum systems where citizens can change the direction of how those cantonal structures work. And on top of that, each pilot program has to be connected to a study. So the amount of data being gathered from this pilot is immensely greater than what we're going to see in the Netherlands. So not only is that going to serve the policymakers in Switzerland to create better roadmaps for integration within their own society, but it's going to set the standard of how we gather data and understand this plant and this product and this industry for the whole world to follow as a roadmap.
That's very true.
I think as well the Swiss government, they made the right decisions. They made a limit on 20% of THC, which it's not necessary to go higher. Look at the Canadian market, look at the US market, all talking about THC. The highest THC, the better. It's not. If you have a nice outdoor organic production, you will have such nice terpenes. We are talking about so many benefits with all these terpenes. It's Swiss quality. We have to show them that it's not necessary to go higher than 20%, and we have the same effect, even the better effects, with this product.
Stefan, and that's an ideological, organic grower's way to approach it, but look at it from the market perspective. So the Netherlands has 570 coffee shops. We have the data of exactly what's being bought in all of them. We have the THC, CBD percentages from the whole country. The average THC percentage in these 579 coffee shops across the Netherlands that have been world famous since the mid-70s is 14%.
Yeah.
So the average market doesn't need that THC. They think they need it because it's being advertised. It's what wins cannabis cups. It's what you see in High Times magazine. So there's a glorification of this drive to the moon, right? But as far as the market is concerned, we know exactly what's being bought. We know what the preferences are, and that 20% limit has no bearing whatsoever on whether the people are going to get what they want.
Yeah.
So what makes the Swiss consumer more savvy than the American, let's say?
Oh,
Have you ever seen
really?
Yeah.
how many blind taste tests have you seen across different states in America to actually see what consumer preferences are versus consumer buying preferences are, which is a connection with the eye, right? They see a beautiful bud with plenty of salts and it looks like it's come from another planet and they're willing to spend more money on that chupacabra of a plant, right? But if you do a blind taste test, if you put people in a room, as the sun-grown challenge has proved a few years ago in California, I think something like 80% of people preferred sun-grown versus indoor cultivation.
I think it would all come down to quality at the end. I think we talked about it with Stevie. We went indoor because of some certain reasons. If we go back in time, we used to consume completely different products. And I guess it's going to be really the quality and the efficiency of products that are going to be decisive. And this is why I think we have really to keep this education also on the market. And this is where Switzerland is playing a big role as well. We can see it from universities coming in, governmental authorities doing big efforts for doing research and development. And this is something that really helps us, or is going to help the industry to just spread the knowledge, spread the education to understand the product better, and therewith to be able to choose right.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's go to the Swiss branding. And I mean, we all know what it means. We all know what it stands for. The question is, how long will that work, let's say globally?
Forever.
I mean,
it's working ever since.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some reasons why it is like that. I mean, time costs us money, and costs in Switzerland, we all know, are very high. So that's maybe the point that I already said in the beginning. We really have some major milestones to cover in order to reach some goals. Maybe other nations would be more faster in that. But this also allows us to, overthink, maybe rethink a process in order to be able to establish a process that will really be efficient on a long run as well. So this is why I think Swissness is also appreciated in the world, because we really have a quality, a measurement which is set really high. And this is where we as Swiss people, I think so, are really also being strict with that, because we want to keep that, because that's obviously a privilege that we have in the international trade, right?
I can say that from a Swiss guy that grew up or spent most of his time in Asia, or the majority of time in Asia, and being a Swiss outside of Switzerland gives you a perspective of the understanding of how we are perceived from everybody out there. And that is something that has been created over a very long time. And I'm not going to tell you about Swissness and what we all stand for. I believe you understand trust and, doing things very diligent and not taking shortcuts and actually thinking things through. And I think cannabis has, in general, a lot of challenges, and it will face a lot of challenges all around the world. But Switzerland has been able to also regulate and manage many other things, and again, create these UN, Red Cross, as I mentioned before, these international organizations that have been a driving factor around the world to create a balance between different parts and different arguments. And I think really the chance as Swiss, as a hub to develop for cannabis, is tapping into that Swissness and tagging along with it.
That's
And,
exactly
and
right.
to tap in, I mean, that little red flag is amazing. So why is everybody coming to Switzerland to produce something to then export it to say, look,
Yeah,
it's
I was
actually
gonna
made
go
in
there.
Switzerland?
Yeah.
Right? Because we do have the hub. And I think when we're talking about cannabis as a hub, we have all the infrastructure. I mean, a lot of countries are popping up, whether it's Macedonia, Greece, Portugal. We have here cultivation, we have GMP manufacturing for cannabis already, we have doctors who are willing, we have patients that we want to look after, we have pilot projects. Really, you can come here and test. But talking also on the pharmaceutical side, we do have Big Pharma. We have to cooperate with Big Pharma. We have to cooperate with Swissmedic, with BAG, Federal Office of Public Health, and figure out research. I mean, this is what Switzerland, they are for the last 10 years
That is
in
very
the top
unique,
list
yeah.
for innovation. We have the ability to partner up with our infrastructure and really create Swiss-made cannabis products that may be supplied in the whole globe. I always said it 4 years ago, whenever I'd speak to cannabis companies here, they say, yeah, you know what, we just want to create something and sell it to the Canadians. You know, let's make a quick exit. And I always said, why don't you create a Swiss company or European company that can compete with your Tilrays or your Curaleafs or whatever it is. And this is what I think, again, coming to why Switzerland Hub, we have the infrastructure, we have the right people, we have the knowledge, and it's about, we're open for business.
So it sounds more like it's an interesting place for companies to come in order to take advantage of this Swiss brand and all of these hubs that we're talking about. But how is it inviting for companies that already have their brands established from other countries, and how open to receive is that?
That's a good question, because a lot of companies have come and they've said, well, you know, we want to flood the Swiss market. And as I pointed out earlier, you have to cooperate with Swiss companies.
Yeah.
They're already here. If you want to bring your brand, you have the choice to go through the very heavily regulated process. It might take you 6 months, it might take you 18 months to bring your product here, and you still have to show demand for your product. Otherwise, what, you're just going to flood your country with this product. So come here and maybe partner up with Stevie and cultivate your genetics here. Say now it's, let's take a big example, cookies. Now Swiss-made cookies. You can have that ability, the infrastructure is here, but you have to partner or invest and acquire infrastructure.
Do you find that if, for example, just using cookies as an example, the savvy Swiss consumer, I'm going to call them, do you think they would be more likely to try cookies because it was now made
It's a bit what Leo was saying, right? You see something, you've heard about it, you want to try it. But coming back to the point of Swiss companies coming in, what kind of brand are you going to bring in? In the pilot project, is it allowed? Is it not allowed? We still don't know.
Yeah.
Medical, definitely not. It's still a galenic formulation. It's a magistral recipe.
Yeah.
The last production will be either the GMP manufacturer or the pharmacy. So, you know, there will be opportunity, but I think we have to wait for a couple of years to collect the data. We're open to have investors coming in and figure out how to do a pilot project in Switzerland. But until those brands are going to be active here, probably we have to wait until the legalization really happens.
I strongly think the Swiss consumer will not go for those kind of flashy, colorful, yada, yada, yada brands out there. Swiss consumers stand for quality Swissness. We've always been very driven to actually support, maybe sometimes for some people a bit too driven, to support our own in that sense. But if that's what's the question, right? Would the Swiss consumer go for that? I don't think so. I think the Swiss consumer will go for what they know, where they know what the quality stands for, not just the brand on top of it. They want to know. The Swiss consumer is a very informed consumer. He's one of the consumers that actually does the most research on what they consume, where does it come from, what is going into the product.
But where does it start and where does it stop? That's the thing. What about companies that are bringing in, you know, isolate from God knows where, and then packaging it and adding some terpenes or whatever they're doing and creating their own Swiss-made product?
They'll all disappear. No.
Well, they exist, right? Like, this exists.
They do, and that's where I think Switzerland jumped in again. And there was a report that came out last year with the pharmacists testing 48 CBD products and 46 of them failing. And then you have companies like SwissExtract or SwissQueen over here where they've been pushing for their products and suddenly they're competing with that. So I think regulation has to play a big role of what are you manufacturing here? Yes, you can put your Swiss flag on the CBD product, but what is it really? I think that's why we had a big hit on the CBD industry, because it was kind of open for all, and all the CBD isolate was coming, and you had all the brokers and traders, and it got a bit messy. And now I think it's important to say, we've all made mistakes, and how do we regulate and really create something? I think research, product development, data is really where we're going to maybe see our future.
Okay, so in respect to, I'm going to tie this back in, but when it comes to the flower itself, as you guys were saying, now the preferred choice is for it to be outdoor grown, because that is the better
Or
quality.
greenhouse.
Okay.
Well, as
Not
part of
only
the
outdoor. Outdoor is nice to produce hashish. Like all the big countries like Morocco or Afghanistan or whatever, nobody would produce hashish from an indoor.
Yeah.
That's stupid, and it's too expensive in the end. Look, the electricity bill. No, you don't want to pay it.
We have to differentiate, though, right?
Yeah, and if you want to produce nice flowers, go in a nice protected greenhouse, or go in a place like in Ticino or in the Valley, as I said before. There you can produce nice flowers. Yeah, absolutely.
This is for a recreational aspect, though, right? For
Yeah,
a medical aspect,
yeah.
I think for a medical aspect, you need to stabilize the strains,
No.
you need to actually have
Yeah,
controlled
for sure.
environments and all the. So that's another thing. Yeah, of course. For the regular, for the recreational part, yes, absolutely. Outdoor greenhouse and so forth, which Switzerland always has been strong in. But I think for the medical market, Switzerland has been a pharmaceutical producer for a lot of different products all around the world. We're one of the couple of the biggest companies are in here. So one side, yes, absolutely, recreational. But from the medical side, I believe very much that there's a lot to be done on the other side.
I
of the
fully
spectrum.
agree with you, but I as well think the cannabis flower is not the future of the medical cannabis. Should I give an older lady with cancer, never smoked a flower, and say, yeah, come on, smoke it? No, that's stupid. We have to think different. We have to work with universities producing water-soluble sprays, THC sprays, and then we are as well on R&D. We will do it, for sure.
Which comes back to Switzerland being a hub for manufacturing. Switzerland maybe is not the hub for agricultural production and so forth, but manufacturing is one of the things that this country has strived for or strive from.
and data capture as well, because what you guys are saying is super important, because we have a highly regulated, highly compliant, tested regime here in Switzerland. So the recreational market growing in living soil will have testing, will have data. The medical market growing indoors hydroponically will have testing, will have data. What if the data shows that the living soil is just as stable but has a terpene count that's higher and it's actually better for the patient? Will that knowledge be cross-pollinated? And that's only possible if both of these things exist side by side and we're open and objective of what we do with that data. And we certainly know plenty of medical cultivators who are cultivating in living soil, however, cannot be BioSwiss certified because the roots don't touch the physical earth. It's still grown in pots, on elevated tables, et cetera, but the benefit of living soil is incredible. So to have that side by side in one regime, but tested through a uniform system, could be extremely powerful to illuminate the powerful nature of living soil and other sustainable practices, to signal to the rest of the world that cultivation doesn't have to be a staleworth of a legacy model that came from an indoor understanding of the plant, and we could treat it as another agricultural commodity and even pharmaceutical commodity, which is routinely grown in living soil.
That's very good.
Sorry.
How many plants, how many medical plants are growing indoor? There is only cannabis.
I agree, but I also must say on the medical side, if a patient would still like to have access to a high quality indoor flower because of all the pesticide control and the rest, I think that should also be a big part of it. And talking again about Switzerland and indoor cultivation, we're all thinking about sustainability. I mean, Leo talked a bit about ESG yesterday, and there are companies here that are thinking, well, now we have huge electricity bills coming up, so how am I going to become more sustainable? There's solar panels being put in, or there's water being used in different ways where it's filtered and reused again. This is a big part of, again, of the conversation we're having in Switzerland, that we're also thinking about sustainability. We're thinking of small hubs and how can we bring our production costs lower but still be sustainable and have an affordable medication, whether it will be an indoor flower in some pharmacies, because you shouldn't say, I know it will eventually, probably if recreational comes in, flower will not be so much sold in pharmacies, but that will still be there. And I think very much outdoor greenhouse production, it will go more into derivatives, hashes, oils, because your production costs vary. But I don't think we should not include indoor. I know, Stevie, you're very on the organic side, but...
Okay. What are we doing on time? Okay. Another thing that I wanted to touch on that I found interesting that we were talking about the other day was how universities are working closely with Big Pharma, and I know this is what you want to talk about. And I love that. I mean, I think that is something very rare and very special. And obviously that encourages research and development and innovation. And that is a unique selling point from me, coming as a Canadian.
Exactly. I think to wrap it up a little bit, it has been said already right now. I mean, we are finding out what has been or what is the most efficient way to do a product that is not harmful and that might sustain the environment, the society, the politics, and so on. And I think that's what we are seeing now, is that we are really trying to understand how to bring a product that is really safe and efficient and so on. I mean, talking about recreational or not, mostly about medicinal, but still, we understood, or we are understanding, and this is where universities are now getting into or becoming more and more interested to make a big contribution to that, is that genetics are a big theme, DNA is a big theme, and really the development of the compounds of the plant will be a major role in the future. And I think this is what we really are realizing, and what is the most important for any industry is to create an acceptance, right? And this comes when we talk together, when we sit together, and we include all. But this also comes when the results, the data that has been collected is showing results, and these results might be able to apply it in any benefit for the nation, right? And this is what we are seeing now. I think I'm not the only one working with authorities, governments, and universities that are really playing a big role in this kind of process, which is, I think, one of the most important process also to get, authorities, government, and so on into the cannabis boat, let's say. I think Stevie or maybe Luc, I don't know, you can add something to that.
Yeah, Switzerland has always been a very strong R&D hub. We have a very, very high level of education here. There's a lot of companies from around the world that come here and actually do their studies on, be it medical, be it any kind of product over here. And definitely one of the big driving factors into the future, I believe, is to close how the government and universities and different kind of facilities around that also have support, not just support from the financial side. On one side there's Swiss and different organizations that really actually, if you have something that you can come forward with, support you on those levels. But we also have a government that understands that when there is new things coming up, like cannabis is a new thing. I know it's not a new thing, but it's a new thing. So then you have those that Switzerland has this size where we're close enough between the different layers of the country. Right? We have Bundesamt für Gesundheit, or Federal Office of Public Health. We have the cantons, we have the research institutions, and we see this with the pilot project that they came forward and actually allowed a legal framework to be created to drive that further. In the end, this is a study. We're doing a nationwide study here right now, and that is R&D. That's the definition of R&D. And all of those different parts coming together with then, of course, the industry participants. I think that is a big driving factor for the future of Switzerland and will actually bring this further. And I very strongly believe that what is going to come out of this pilot project and the data that is going to be collected there really will lead the way in for many other countries also to look into how that approach has been found and not just let's do it like this or like this or like this. So many different aspects that I believe from the R&D side will drive this further.
And to add, what's really interesting is about the conversation. I mean, probably most of us here who are operating in Switzerland, you can reach somebody at the Federal Office of Public Health to have a brainstorming conversation very easily. Swissmedic, cantonal pharmacists. And since this whole conversation of cannabis has started, there hasn't been one who said, cannabis ad. Everybody's like, I'm interested, there's something happening, I want to get involved in the conversation. Guide me, what are we doing, how are we going to help? I can't sign this off. I mean, we heard yesterday Jürg Matter, the politician, saying, yes, we are interested to put it through Parliament, but give us a process, give us some research, give us some data. How are we going to do it? Are you sure? I mean, and it's amazing to see how much conversation around this plan has been created in Switzerland and how quickly you can reach everybody who are position holders that make a decision to really sit with you and have a coffee and discuss. And that's what's really interesting as well, which you probably won't see in other countries because there's a lot of red tape. So yeah, again, Switzerland as a hub, I think we do have the conversation going on, and it's an interesting time.
No, and that's nice because I think in North America, it's always common, like when you hear things about Switzerland, it's such a small country, what do they know, what are they going to do? And it's impressive to see the impact that has already been made. And I think it's quite commendable for being such a trailblazer in so many other areas as well. Coming from a Canadian, sincerely. But I mean, so just to kind of wrap this up a bit so we can have some questions from the audience, let's just jump back into, so I mean, when it comes to companies and what's inviting for them, what is the best part then? I know this sounds like a repetitive question, but there's other things that we didn't really get into. Like, I know there's more that you can say, Luc, when it comes to compliance and regulatory standards. So, I mean, let's just, one final thing.
I think one big aspect of Switzerland is also, we've always been very business first. We've always been very open, very welcoming. You can open a company very fast here. You can actually kick things off. Yes, you need to have Swiss people involved one way or the other, but there's a lot of different aspects that really drive that friendliness, openness to bring things further here. And to go from the compliance and regulatory framework and so forth is, Switzerland has always been seen also through its neutrality as somebody that's on the forefront, that is also, can through a lot of agreements with different countries. We're bound to different economical zones, but we're also very independent to actually create export and import-export trade routes, right? So Switzerland's always been a pioneer in the trade routes, which I think will be a very big driving factor also for the industry. And for cannabis especially, again, to be able to actually create something that is new in a country that already has a big recognition factor for being compliant on all levels, I think is something that will really, really bring this further and position Switzerland as a hub that can trigger the next part of the cannabis discussion globally.
So I think if we talk about Switzerland as a future cannabis hub, we have to examine what are cannabis hubs? What's the definition of a cannabis hub?
Yeah.
And I could name a few. Israel comes to mind as the research and scientific hub. And it has a reason for being there from 1967. That was their reason for being in the cannabis industry. That stayed consistent. Canada has been cultivating in British Columbia longer than most people understand. And the cannabis in the US that first was quality came from Victoria Island. So that culture was always there. United States, because of the way the state legislature worked and the disparate nature of the industry, it's a development of brands. So brands took over, and we have more innovation that comes out of the US cannabis market than any other one, right? Well, Switzerland is responsible for largely the CBD wave and the medical cannabis wave we're now experiencing around the whole world, and that's what few people don't understand. the original genetics that became the CBD boom, this high CBD variety hemp flower, was crossed in Switzerland, is propagated in Switzerland. And there's a decision made by those who were there at that table that this is the way for acceptance of this plant as medicine. And they pushed it without the intention to have any monetization on THC at that time. And it created this CBD boom around the world that then created the conversation around other...
THC.
Exactly. So if we're talking about what is a hub has a legacy contribution to the industry. No one will co-opt a hub. No one will just magically become a hub without having some experience, as Stefan can attest to, for 30 years of doing something and pushing it forward. So I think we should be talking about not the future of Switzerland as a cannabis hub. It's already a cannabis hub, but as the borders are opening around the world and this industry is globalizing, more and more will people understand the contribution that Switzerland has always played for this industry.
But say, we already said the history, the environment. Maybe to add something new, I would also put the innovation in this kind of discussion, because we have been, or we always have been, and we are one of the most innovative nations around the world. And I think there are some innovations coming that will be important also for the cannabis industry globally, renewable energies and so on. So I guess maybe something that we have been talking about, you know, this sustainability and how is Switzerland gonna be as sustainable as Colombia that has more than 300 days of sun? I think there are some surprises for us still on the market, and this is very promising if we are really talking about Switzerland. And we know that a lot of very well-known and appreciated brands. We talked about Nespresso. I'm Italian. I can name you 10,000 brands that are better than Nespresso coffee, but everybody here knows Nespresso because they did one thing right: branding in Switzerland. So I think there are a few privileges. We're using them, and I really hope that we are gonna, you know, put the rest of what is coming in the future in the right way, in order not to make maybe the same mistakes that have been made on the market.
Michela, they did two things right. They also got George Clooney right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Oh, where's my George then? Okay.
Oh, and people trust in Switzerland. People trust in Swiss quality since many, many years. It was always like this. It's a part of the culture. We are quality driven. And this is the sustainability. This will be on the long way, always the right way.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah, and I mean, just, are you done, Siri? So George Clooney comment came in.
We're all distracted now.
Can I use it for branding?
No, but I think just going back to the word hub, what is a hub? You know, we're definitely a trading hub. I mean, we have more than 500 of the most biggest trading companies here in Switzerland for many various reasons. But I think also, take the example of chocolate. You know, we produce 40% of the world's chocolate. We don't produce a single coffee bean. Chocolate bean, right? But actually, fun fact that I was reading today, Switzerland consumes 51% of the chocolate production that it does locally. So Swiss guys do love chocolate after all. But I think just because we will be a cannabis hub doesn't mean that, you know, outside producers cannot come here and use our infrastructure to make a Swiss product and have it done here. And really, I think Switzerland is a hub for many reasons: innovation, production, manufacturing, quality, premium products that you can put a little Swiss flag and maybe charge a little bit of premium. But if you have the data, you probably sell it globally. And this will be a big part of what we will focus on the next few years.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, we do. Oh.
Thank you. This question goes to Luc. And, well, this is basically, well, you are a strong believer of this pilot test here in Switzerland. What do you think are like the expected outputs of this pilot test in order to have like the foundation of the next medical cannabis stage here in Switzerland?
They're recreational trials. Yeah, so let's stay on the recreational side. What are the major outcomes that are hoped for is your question, right, in the end? The beauty of this study is it's whatever you want to find out is that you can bring to the table, not you as a person, but as an industry in whole and in total. What we really try to figure out with this whole pilot project approach is what is the best way to go through that legalization process? What is the best way to create a legal framework? Where is the best point of sale? What kind of product should be sold? What kind of product does the consumer want? How do you bring that product there? How do you keep a quality standard? How do you make sure nothing goes from the supply chain into the black market and vice versa? How do you make sure that in every stage of production throughout the supply chain you have clear quality control as you should have in other products? If you do, there's more compliance on a tomato in a supermarket than on many CBD products out there. And going back into the recreational part and what the outcome is hoped for, it really depends because there's many different studies that are being conducted with different targets to figure out. So there's many, many different aspects, but in the end of the day, what it leads to and what we as an industry hope it leads to is to have a clear regulatory framework and clear guidance where we can build the industry based upon and then move forward. So this is basically the outcome that I think is going to be the most important one, is understanding what works. Because everything that is out there right now, in my humble opinion, does not work. So I hope that answers the question, but I think...
And what's interesting, just to add on Luc's thing, what do we want the outcome for this pilot project to be? And just jumping on the pilot project conversation of who is conducting them, who is conducting the research, what protocols are they putting in? A lot of the ones that just are beginning are seeing every consumer that is signing up as an addict. Right? They're not addicts. I mean, this is an opportunity also for Switzerland, and going back to inviting foreign companies to come in to do a pilot project with local companies and local universities and funding it to find out consumer data. Why are you now drinking less wine because now you have a legal market? This is where I would like to see the data coming back, and that way we can really prove to the government that, look, if you do have a legalized market, we have actually tried to test in 20 different cantons all these different variables and look at all this fantastic data that we have. I think that's how we could probably become successful.
Which is something that's lacking a lot in the industry. When you look at these large companies and big pharma, they're not doing the research that is required. And the fact that Switzerland is operating almost like a big company in itself is very, again, very impressive. We had another question, yeah.
Hello, I just had a quick question for actually any of you guys, more so about standardization. So I'm from America, and you can grab 5 different companies. They all have a strain, let's say strain A, but they're all kind of like different, like CBD levels, THC levels, all sorts of cannabinoids, but they also have some really silly names as well, right? So is Switzerland gonna, when they adopt the legal market, are they going to have like a more standardized like sort of name that like the name almost tells you like what the effect of the strain would be, or is it just going to be like different based on the company?
That's kind of like a branding thing too, though. That's interesting. That's a good point, because you think of like everyone knows Gorilla Glue and Amnesia and White Widow. So, I mean, it depends on the consumer and what they're looking for in that sense.
I think if we look at the current CBD market, obviously there's something like 570 licensed producers of CBD flower in Switzerland. So there's an existing market which we could look at as a precedent. And if you look at the exhibitors here, you'll see that it's names and funky effects, just like the US market and Canadian market. So realistically, I think we all talk about that. Wouldn't it be great to have some sort of qualitative naming convention? But I think every country is quite far away from that. I personally, overseeing a company that does business in a lot of different countries, I don't see that changing rapidly. It's going to be up to an individual brand that takes a position and goes that way to differentiate. But as a whole, I don't necessarily see that changing.
I mean, there's hybrids now,
Yeah,
right? Like,
there is a new GACP law out there, which basically means a strain has to be registered. You have a plant passport that is behind. So yes, you can call all of them Gorilla Glue if you want, but actually what Switzerland is doing right now, they had to stabilize the strains and they had to actually work with them for a year and make sure that everything is in line. And register, what is register, right? Where does the IP start and where does it end? There's a large company over there that can tell you much more in detail about that. But in general, the aspect of the GACP, which is the ground for the Swiss, everything about the agricultural part, is that... Stevie, you've been selecting these strains for 2 years. Come on, say something.
It's always
yes
funny
and no to your answer.
When we
Why don't you
looked at the
give them a name
past,
that's more
all people
descriptive?
were talking about indica, sativa,
Yeah.
and then what is it? In the end, it's you have to have a profile. You have to have a profile of terpenes. This is much more interest than indica or sativa. The name, who cares? If you know the profile, if you know exactly what's in there, all the cannabinoids, not only THC and CBD.
Chemotypes, yeah.
Yeah, chemotypes. This is interesting.
but even
Which
terpenes.
name you write on it, this is marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And
It
it's
always
like that.
will be.
You have to register, that's
Yeah.
correct, but the actual registered genetics, they're named as however the company wanted to name it. So, yeah, there's still the ability to do that.
But there's a possibility to keep it stable. I guess
Yeah.
that was the other part of it.
Through that.
And
Registered,
consistent.
but marketing registered.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. Impressive. I have a question following the question before, actually. So, how do you see as a hub to proceed also fulfilling international law, for example, Nagoya Protocol, for the genetic development, what you're just mentioning, you know, because you need to be secured that the state of origin is traceable. And how do you see this tackled? Did you have already conversations with BAFU, for example, who is the competent authority? Did you have ideas around that? Because registering genetics sounds very interesting, but how do you tackle it from an international law perspective?
That's a good question.
That's where Luc comes in. That's where his
And
software
Stefan.
comes in. I think so. Or at least on one hand.
Yeah.
I don't know who wants to start with that.
Well, it's a very touchy subject,
Yeah.
registering IP and strains in agriculture in general, right? What is the IP of the strain? What is the active
Yeah.
trait? What do you actually register within it? So there is no, I don't have an answer to that part of the IP and the registering and of that side. But what the GACP laws there and what is now coming up is that you have to have an identification of that plant and have it tested, and then from then onwards, trace every single step that you do with it. And that will then kind of protect certain aspects of it. But is your question going down the line of how do you protect your IP within the industry, right? Or
How do you fulfill international law?
Phytosanitary certificate of
yeah,
exportation,
that's
things of
a-
that
that's-
nature.
phytosanitary certification, plant passports, and all of that.
That's
yeah.
required.
And that obviously only relates to strains or cultivars that are coming in from the outside. The question is, how do we treat the genetics that are already here? How do we essentially legitimize them? And that process has happened obviously in Canada and is happening in Canada. It's happening to some extent in the Netherlands via other hubs. So these things are being done, but there's no easy answer for what you said, because cannabis coming from prohibition, you have 100 years of non-existence, and all of a sudden this seed magically appears and you need to trace its origin and have it be accounted for. It's an impossibility, as we both know, but a very good question to put everyone on the spot in the last 5 minutes.
No, and there is no international harmonization of all the regulatory aspects to it, right?
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
go into any other agricultural product, you have certain standards that go across the globe, and in cannabis that's simply not the case. It's not there yet. We're not there yet. That's what conferences like this and what bringing like-minded people that think this together forward, then again with the regulator and everybody together, create a standard for that, because there's none from where I stand. There is different aspects. There's different aspects in other industries. You can always take some inspiration from from other industries, but cannabis, because specifically recreational, There is no international law. It's forbidden. It's very simple. You can't register something that's illegal. So, and on the medical side, that also is an issue within, but there's different aspects, and this is one of the things where I think the industry should regulate, never should regulate itself, but come forward with something that would work based on international laws and international standards.
That's another
Maybe
panel
we
discussion.
need to also differentiate. It's not like a register where you like save or protect your IP. It's more of a provement that a certain genetic which is being registered has had stability in different environments. So maybe this is also something that is interesting for you to know. It's a Swiss, again, we love to be Swiss. It's a Swiss catalog of same, and it's more of it's not really an origin.
It's a protocol thing.
Provement, but it's more of a stability in the plant itself.
Anyone else? I guess we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Farida.
Thank you, Farida.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Farida.